Did you know that moose might actually look at your car as another moose? Because apparently there's been a lot of car accidents where a moose sees its reflection in the car and typically uses that as a moose duel. It will fight your car thinking it's another moose because they see the reflection. So just because they're big doesn't mean they're smart. And typically those are our favorite kind of bass, the big ones that aren't smart. And a great way to trick those big fish is a jig. Now this works all time of year, but especially in the fall. We're gonna be talking about jig fishing, the only two jigs that you need in the fall time to catch bass. So two jigs that shine for me all year round, but especially right now in the fall time, is a football jig and a flipping jig. And it's very simple in how I am going to throw each, and as well as where I'm going to throw each. The football jig I'm going to throw out deeper along rock piles, sand transitions, grass lines, and the flipping jig I'm gonna flip on shallow cover like wood, docks, and then any remaining grass as you get deeper into the fall. So we got the football jig and we have the flipping jig. Obviously they seem very similar in nature that I just showed you guys, but we'll break through each one and show you how they're different and how I'm going to throw each of them in the setups that we're going to throw them on. As always, guys, if these baits are available on Omnia Fishing, I will link them down below so you guys can go and order them and get 10% off. If they're not on Omnia Fishing, I'll give you guys a link to where you can best go and buy them. Now setup wise, you can throw the exact same rod, reel, line combination for a football jig versus throwing a flipping jig. But for me, I change them up a little bit different because I get super nitty gritty with all of my techniques. So I'll walk through each of those with you guys. But right here is a Beast Coast tungsten football jig. It's what's called the dozer. You see it's got that little pattern on the front that helps kind of grip and grab on the bottom of what you're throwing, whether it's a sand transition, rock, things like that. And allows it to grab on and also be able to give that bait a little bit more action. But this is a 7/16 ounce, so a little bit under a ½ ounce jig right there. I like to go a little bit heavier on the football jigs because it allows that bait to have more bottom contact, especially for when you're dragging versus lifting it up along bottom. And obviously cadence can play a different factor, but you can keep it super simple in that cast, let it hit bottom, and then use your rod to just drag. And how fast you move your rod is obviously how fast that bait will be moving across bottom. Typically, in my opinion, slower is better, less is more. On the back there, we have a Strike King Rage Chunk. That is, I think it's like a green pumpkin watermelon they got on there. And same for the jig, it's just a green pumpkin with a little bit of watermelon on the skirt in there. Super natural, green pumpkin, great crawl imitation. And so with this one, again, cast, let it hit bottom, and then slowly drag. If you bump into a rock and you're kind of getting caught a little bit, raise your rod tip up, like so, like raise it up, and give it a pop. What that bait will do is it'll bump into that rock, but then pop up over it. You'll find a lot of times when you do that too, that can trigger a bite. Maybe there's a fish that's tailing your bait, following it, and when you bump it up, that can kind of trigger of that crawfish fleeing, and that can be the exact trigger you need to get that fish to bite. Now you can also do kind of what they call stroking a jig, which is simply just lift, hold your rod tip up, and that is going to make that bait come up and then pendulum back down. And so it's simple as reel, stroke, let it fall down, hits bottom. You'll notice because your line will bounce slack, and typically with the rod you're using, you'll feel that too. Reel in your line slack, maybe give it a second. What I like to do as well, a little bit of some juicy tidbit for you guys, is on that line slack, just shake the line slack. Don't move the jig, just take your line slack and knock it, and it'll allow that bait to essentially sit there on bottom and just kind of be moving a little bit like that. It'll allow that jig skirt to flare a little bit, and that could be a great way to get some bites too when they're being finicky. The setup, this is a 7.3 medium heavy. This is a 13 fishing Myth. Love this lineup of rods. We have a 13 fishing, I think it's a TX2. It's actually more of a saltwater reel, but one that I've liked in the 13 fishing lineup. 15-pound straight fluorocarbon is typically what I go to. More being up here in the north and having that bait farther out, 15-pound works just fine, for at least for me, for bigger fish, as well as allows you to get some more bites in my opinion. But if you're out in Texas, Florida, maybe you're going across some shell, so you might be exposing that bait into some more harsher bottom, if that makes sense, where you might run into cutting up your line a little bit. You might want to beef up to 17-pound, 20-pound fluorocarbon when you're around bigger fish and you're around some of that more sharper terrain to give yourself a little bit of an edge and security, if you will, once you go to set the hook and not break off. Now, when you're throwing a football jig too, with that line of thinking, always, whether you catch a fish or not, be maintaining and checking your line. Looking for frays, retying if you feel any sort of nicks in your line, especially the closer you are towards your bait, the more likely you are to see if there's any nicks in your line. So typically I always check basically from the rod tip down to my bait every other couple casts, or if I feel like I bumped into something, or even after every fish catch, I'm checking that to make sure that there's no nicks. So the next time I go to set the hook, I'm not breaking off and putting a fish leaving a bait in a fish's mouth. The gear ratio on this is a 7.5 to 1. You don't need to stress that, but I like a higher gear ratio because I can pick up line faster. So when a fish bites, I can reel in that line slack and then kind of give them the beans. That 7.3 medium heavy, typically these football jigs too have a little bit heavier gauge hooks. That allows me to set the hook a lot harder. Now I'm not saying swing the baseball bat, give them the beans. It's still a decent hook set, but I'm not trying to, knock their brains loose. But that gear ratio allows me to catch up to those fish if I have some line slack, or sometimes too, they will pick up that bait and run left to right, and that helps you be able to catch up with those fish and get a better hook penetration on your hook set. So super simple, target some steeper breaks, target rock piles, target sand flats, shell bars, things like that. A great little versatile bait all times of year, but especially in the fall, once you get down below that 70-degree water temp is when those crawfish get a little more active. And as these fish start to get on bottom, obviously it makes a great presentation for those fish to eat a jig. Now, the second one that we mentioned, the flipping jig, what's different in that is the style of head. And right here, this is a queen tackle tungsten flipping jig. You can see more of an archy style shaped head on it. Allows that bait to fall straighter, but also come through cover a little bit easier than the football jig. On the back, we got a Rapala Crush City cleanup craw, just a simple craw type pattern with two little tails there, a little bit of appendages on the side, but green pumpkin all around, just because for me that is crawfish. That's also bluegill. That's an easy imitation for some of our clear water lakes, at least up here in the north. But green pumpkin, that exact jig, you can't go wrong anywhere in the country. Now, if you're in the south or even the north too, you can go up to a much bigger jig. You're not going to get as many bites, but it's a great way to catch some bigger fish. But I feel like, in my opinion, this little half-ounce tungsten jig catches a lot of fish, but also big ones at that. And setup-wise, this is a 7-1 heavy. This is a Fenwick Elite 7-1 heavy. We got a Lew's Custom Pro, 17-pound straight fluorocarbon. If you can see right there too, I only spooled up half of that reel. I do that for the reason of typically, shallow spools are becoming a more popular thing for flipping, skipping, things like that. What that does is, one, allows me to, when I'm skipping under docks, skipping under trees, overhanging trees, things like that, it allows less liability, or I guess room for error, if you will, for backlashing. So it's a little bit better line maintenance when I only reel half of that spool in for some of that stuff that I'm only casting out, say 20 foot max. A lot of flipping and a lot of short range skipping. And so this 7-1 heavy fast has enough tip that allows me to be able to have the backbone to really drive that hook home, because on these flipping jigs, you're going to have a thicker gauge hook in there. And so skipping under docks, skipping under overhanging trees allows to have the tip with that fast action to be able to skip, get that momentum going, getting that pendulum of the bait to skip the bait, but the heavy action of the rod, when I get that bite, I can drive the hook home and then wrench them out. So I'm gonna target a lot of shallow cover, wood, but also what I'll do too is, as the temperatures get colder throughout the fall, grass is starting to die. What that means is it's gonna be a lot easier to find that last remaining grass, and those fish will then group up in that last remaining healthier grass, basically giving you less parts of the lake to go and try to find those fish. And then flipping a jig into that grass is a great way to target them and catch them. So pretty straightforward. There's two different ways you can approach it. You can be super simple and like how I do in regards to when I'm skipping under a dock, under a tree, or even flipping into grass. I'm gonna skip in there. I'm gonna let it fall to the bottom. I'm gonna give it one hop, two hop, and then typically I'm reel it back and then make my next approach. But you can also let it hit bottom and then drag it all the way back to the boat if you want to. If you feel like those fish are being lethargic, but you know they're there, that can be a way to trick them and get you a couple extra fish. But for me, I'm impatient, I have ADHD, and so it's typically skip or flip, one hop, two hop, reel back, make my next approach. But those are the 2 jigs that you need for the fall that will get the job done. They're great all year round, but especially in the fall time, a jig is a great way to go catch some big bass. Typically a largemouth style, but football jig is largemouth, smallmouth, spotted bass, whatever it may be in your fishery. But the jig always catches. So keep a jig locked in your hands for the fall time. You'll catch a lot of fish, you'll catch some big fish, and you'll have a lot of fun doing so. Hopefully you guys enjoy these tips. Hopefully they help you out. If you guys have a bait or technique or application you want me to talk about on the next Bass Fishing Playbook video, please let me know down in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. Appreciate y'all for watching. We'll see you on the next one.